Hello everybody, so MC here. This is my tent. I got a Big Agnes Copper Spur UL-1, which is basically a really fancy way of saying the new Big Agnes one-person tent. And for most of the hike, I really loved it. It is a two-wall tent. Everything that you need for it, comes with. You need to pay for by the footprint separately if you're purchasing it. But I know multiple people that have run similar tents with just Tyvek or Polycro or a tarp or various things to just put underneath it. So yeah, I liked it for most of the hike until the tent poles started breaking for no real reason, with me not putting any excessive strain or wear on them. I would just do the exact same thing I had done the previous day, and then snap, the tent poles break, which is, you know, a bit of a design flaw. I feel as though they should have caught that in quality assurance, but, you know, they didn't, so here we are, and I finished my hike, so here we are. So, remember how I mentioned in my little intro that the tent poles got broken? Well, one, you can tell that my tent is not, you know, even. It is slanted and saggy, and a couple of other words that begin with that letter. So, fortunately, I am a clever man, which means I was able to figure out a solution in the form of turning my freestanding tent into functionally a semi-freestanding tent by shoving my trekking poles into the frame the same way that pretty much Snapshot does to hold up his tent, which is definitely not what the Big Agnes people intended when they designed this tent, but it is, in fact, a way to keep your broken tent upright when push comes to shove and you are a couple of days out from society. And look, isn't that so much better, so much more vertical, and so much more spacious? It's great. So now let me give you the grand tour. It is not as large as Snapshot's tent, but it has served me quite well. However, continuing your comparisons with Snapshot's tent, you can open your vestibules, which is kind of a must-have for a tent, because you're not really using a tent if it doesn't really have a vestibule. It's open. This one opens up too. It's able to roll up over here and really just give you a lot more airflow. Not quite as much as a double vestibule tent like Cobweb and Snapshot have. However, this is still easily enough to make a difference if you're having issues with condensation or temperature, neither of which I really ever had with this tent. That's one of the benefits of having a two-wall tent, is instead of the moisture condensating onto the inner wall with the mesh and such that you're up against, it condensates on the rainfly out here and then runs down and drips off. And now, pardon the mess, I was not expecting guests. It's a little dirty in here. Oh. And it is not the most spacious. I can barely fit, if I'm sitting down and have my back straight, I can barely keep my head from hitting the ceiling. But it is, as someone who's 6 foot, it is just barely enough to be able to fit me. For someone like Snapshot, who is 6'4", it would not be working. But I am on the upper end of what is of the height range that is able to use this tent. In addition, there is very little width to it. One of the very nice perks of having such a small tent, though, is I can pitch in very, very small spaces, whereas other tents that are larger need much bigger footprints and just areas to be able to just set up. I do not have that issue. If I can find a space that is 6.5 feet long by about 2.5 feet wide, I can set up my tent, which is a huge plus, particularly early on when you're hiking with the bubble and not as many people have dropped out yet. But it kind of just barely fits me. It's very snug. I fit in it like a glove.
Show us how you fit.
All right. So how I fit is barely. If I point my toes, they are touching the end, and there is about that much space between the top of my head and the top of my tent, which is, you know, like I said, I just barely fit in here. Another thing, I cannot fit my backpack inside my tent with me. It has to sit here in the vestibule, you know, getting slightly rained on, having slugs crawl on it, spiders crawl on it. The amount of times I have pulled a slug out of the hip belt of my backpack before putting it on is more than once, and I'm not happy about that. So yeah. Any other questions from the peanut gallery?
Would you recommend it?
That is a tough call, because I know somebody who purchased the same model of tent 6 years ago, and it has not broken, it has not fallen apart, it is still in incredible condition, and I don't know if they have changed something in those 6 years, or if I just got a faulty model, a faulty unit. But if this is how every unit is made, I cannot really recommend it, because if you are doing a shorter trek, I would recommend just carrying a more spacious tent. If you're car camping, carry a bigger tent, because you can afford to. Pardon the moving camera, there's a bee harassing snapshot. Be gone, bee! It's mostly gone. But if this is the way that every one of these tents is, I cannot really recommend it, because there are moments of me just adjusting it slightly in ways, just moving it in the same way that I had moved it every time, setting it up the previous day and for months prior, and then just the tent poles just snapped. And that is an unacceptable breach in quality to me. So I cannot recommend it. I cannot wholeheartedly recommend it, unfortunately.
All right. Thanks for the tour.
You're welcome.